G'day guys. Today I'm here with Jeff Levinson.
Levinson.
Thank you. And we're going to talk about your cool architecture explorer.
Okay, sounds good.
So just tell us a little bit about yourself, because you work for Boeing,
Yep.
which is a pretty big company, unless you like Airbuses.
It's still a big company, even if you like Airbus.
Right. And what is it like working, what is it like implementing TFS when you're implementing it for such a big company compared with little companies?
You become a lot more concerned with the process templates, with making sure there's a uniform development process, making sure you can report on everything and trace everything, which is kind of the bigger concern.
What does trace everything mean?
So you need to be able to follow a requirement or user story or whatever you want to call it down to its tasks, down to which code it changed, down to what test cases were written, which ones were executed, which passed, which failed, who worked on it, everything.
Great, but TFS does all that. You turn on a check-in policy and it does pretty much most of that if you use all the right bits?
It does. There's just not any way to really, without drilling through everything in real time, see all of it, right? You have to drill through all of your work items or go to your code and annotate it and then trace it back up. There's no visual for the end-to-end picture.
Is all this traceability just because you're a big company, or is it because when a plane crashes they want to know whether the bug got fixed or things like that?
It depends on the program. If there are technical programs, they want to see end-to-end traceability to know how a piece of code got in there. But even if you're under, in the United States anyway, SOX compliance, where you have to know what piece of code went in there, was it authorized to go in there, if it affects financial systems. So there's a lot of different needs for it.
Right. Am I oversimplifying it by thinking of it that you just want more, a stronger check-in policy, that it wouldn't allow you to check in without having test cases and without testing and all that type of stuff? Or are you asking for things outside of what's in the box with TFS?
So actually TFS gives us everything we need in terms of traceability. Of all the systems that are out there, you get the most traceability, because most systems don't trace down into code. They don't integrate source code repositories with test cases or anything like that. For us, because different teams work in different processes, and we let teams do that because we don't want to dictate to everybody, it comes down to how well do people carry out the processes that you put forward for them.
Right. Okay. So I'm interested to look at this Architecture Explorer in the context of how I work. So let's have a look. This is your architecture work item extension for Visual Studio 2013. When I get a user story back, I get this view here, and I've just taken one sample one, which we've come through, and there's just a couple of simple tasks. They had to go and implement it, and then they test it. So this was done by Jared. It's user story 30314. How does this work with the way you work? I've just gone ahead now, and I've gone to Tools and Extensions, and I've thrown in your Architecture Work Item Explorer extension. Show me how this hangs. Show me how you look at this thing, whether there's anything wrong with what we've done.
Okay, so first, just from a technical perspective, once you open up the Architecture Explorer, you have to go and select a particular file, which is this teamproject.dgml. Yep. Which I will come down here and do, because this first section is not extensible. But once you click it, it jumps into the extension that I wrote, and you select your collection first.
Yep, you'll have to type time in this one to find it.
All right.
And it's the second one.
All right, you select your project. Now here you've got a variety of ways that you can look at or find any work items or other things, right? You can also do things like diagram your security, your state models, or the transition states for your work items. But what we're going to do right here is just look under iterations, and that was in the MVC iterations, so we'll select that. This will show us any sub iterations, which it was sprint 27. So select that. And as you go, the code name for this when Microsoft was building it was progression, right? Because as you go down everything, it continually expands what's under it. This was 30 something or other.
3314, I think it was. It's the most recent one anyway.
There we go.
Yep.
And so what this is doing now is this is telling us that for this story, there were 2 related tasks.
So far you just see exactly what I saw.
Yep, I see exactly what
2.
you saw. Now, the interesting part here is what you don't see is you don't see test cases because those would show up.
Oh, so you're looking at this seeing what you're not seeing. You're not seeing certain things.
Yep, I'm not seeing certain things. I also don't see that this is linked to source code. So the check-ins for tasks were done with no one putting in links to the source code. So if I were to look at the source code, I would not know why that source code was there, or I wouldn't know what source code was written against this particular story.
I'm sure Jared's listening.
Not to get anybody in trouble. But anyways, once you've gotten to where you're going, you can throw this out on a graph here, and you can get rid of the kind of garbage stuff that you don't need to worry about here. And change the layout here and resize it. And now you've got your project in the iterations in sprint 27. You've got this particular story in here. And then you can see the parent-child relationship between these items here. There's properties that are put in with each of these. So for example, you can come in here and for a node category, you can color your user stories, for example, something that just makes it easier to figure out which stories that you want to have, and you want to make your stories pop so you can see what the focal point of these things are. But there's also things like node property, like assign to, and you can, if these things were assigned to different people, in this case it was only assigned to one person, and it'll tell us who the person was that it was assigned to. Sorry, Gerard. But if you had multiple people assigned to these work items, they could actually get colored individually, so you could actually look at per person how they're colored. And then you've also got link categories here, contains parent-child, and you can highlight those. You can also turn this into groupings, for example, if you go to advanced and oops. Actually, I did that wrong. That's bad.
So I can see you're visually looking at this data, but I'm trying to see what does this give you?
So what this gives us is this gives us the ability to tell somebody, or in some sort of a review, anything like that that might happen, is we can say this thing was tested. You can also do things like say, if I make a change to this requirement, I can now see what the impact is for all the other things that the requirement is associated with. So when you start getting into links like, if you have a requirement and you have a bug, well, the bug affects the requirement. The bug might also affect another requirement, right? So if I make a change to the first requirement, there's a good chance that the second requirement's also affected because the bug connected them. So there's some shared code between them.
So when you log the bug, do you go to some trouble to identify which user story the bug came from?
Sometimes you can do that, and a lot of times you can't, right? Because you've got so much history on work items that, or on code, that when somebody finds a bug, you don't necessarily know why that piece of code was in there. Now, if you've been using TFS the entire time and linking source code with the work items, I could actually look at the source code, say, hey, the bug was here, and trace it back up to the requirement. Well, I can visually do that with this tool as well, because you might have a specific line that was changed, but you might have a file that was part of very many other requirements as well. You can see that using the tool.
So when you start working with teams that are new to TFS, what are some of the things that you tell them, look, you've got to do this or you don't get value? You saw our work item. Let's just switch over there. What sorts of things? You just say start using test cases and start using check-in policies. Like where do you get the value out of TFS with your tool?
So there's 3 areas that I will always tell teams to use. First is your check-in comment policy, right?
Yes.
I mean, every check-in should have a comment, pure and simple. The second one is every story needs test cases. And the third one, if they can do, every check-in should be associated with a task or a story.
Yes.
So however you want to do it. Those are the 3 things that we tell teams to do. It is very hard for people somehow to remember to do all 3 of those things. So it's a challenge.
Right. Okay. And so what's with your tool? Is there a way to look at a lot of work items in one go? Can we get an overview of, because you certainly don't use this to look at an individual PBI like we just looked at then.
Right. Normally we look at these things in bulk. So what I might do is come over here, for example, and select work item types and say, I want to see the test cases. So this will go and this will pull 10 test cases back. And from those test cases, what I can do is I can now look at all of the features that those test cases test, for example. This may take a second. This will also pull back the results from the test as well.
We'll just cut out the blank space, it's fine.
Yeah. Okay, so we can now add all of these things here, and for example, if we go and create a new graph, that was adding to an existing graph. How about we create a new graph?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so much data we can't see anything.
I will zoom in on a second. Okay, so actually before I zoom in, yes, it is a lot of data. That's why the legends are especially helpful here. So here we can say, for example, that I want my test cases.
And what are you looking for now?
So now I'm looking for test results for test cases, and I'm looking for stories that have test cases associated with them. So, for example, let's come in here.
So this is giving you a little bit of an idea as to the health of the project based on the way they're using work items.
Yes. Yes. It gives me a point to start to say, if I'm going to go look for something. So, for example, just looking at this, I don't actually care what the data is, but I see that there are about 8 test cases that aren't associated with anything. There's no stories that they're associated with. Why do I have the test cases then? What am I testing? And I can see that there's 2 stories that are. Just like I can also go in here and I can say test outcome, and you'll see there were 3 test outcomes here that were picked up, and you can just use a predefined set here, which I will do. Okay, and now I can see that there were 3 passed tests, 1 never run, and 1 failed test over here. Now I would look at this, for example, failed test, say, where's the bug?
Right.
Where's the bug that was associated with it? I've got a failed test and I got no bug with it. What happened? So this is without actually diving into anything deep. I can see what's there. Now if I actually switch the layout here, left to right always seems to give a better picture here because there's more space. And I kind of zoom in here. I can look and see that this particular test case had this failure, which is associated with which is not associated with a story at all. And look at this. Now this is interesting. Somebody filed a user story as a bug instead of actually filing a bug.
Well, that's lots of people do that because it's a lot simpler not to have to make that decision either way? And is there any real benefit with storing a bug as a bug rather than a bug as it's just another piece of work?
Yeah, you're going to get into a religious war on that one, right? It's some
Are
people.
you religious on this one?
I am not, but sometimes you fix bugs in the iteration if you're doing Agile, and in that case, it's a bug. Sometimes it goes back on the backlog. Is it a bug or a user story at that point? I don't care. Because you can't morph work items in TFS, you can only copy them to another one. I would say you create it as a bug. I mean, this obviously came out of a formal test because the test results were stored with it. And so out of the box, if you're creating a bug during the test run, it will create a bug work item type. And that's what I would have expected to see. That's why I was a little caught off guard by that one. But here's an interesting thing also. You can see that this bug fix is associated with these two change sets. So one of the nice things about this is, let's actually select just that bug here. Is that the bug? 21965. That's the bug. So what you got here, these are the two change sets. Hang on. Okay, so what you've got here is something that's even a little bit more interesting. And these types of things make me sit up and take notice. Okay, let's relay this out because we just added a lot of data there. Okay, so what we're seeing here, and this is a little bit of a cause for concern, is what we just did was we showed the files that were associated with each change here. So in order to fix this bug, I had to do two separate check-ins, which means my first check-in probably did not fix the bug.
That's right.
And the other issue is that this touches 16 different files. That is a big bug fix. Now, looking at this, it looks like this was not necessarily part of the bug fix. They did some code automation here, some test case automation. They created a coded UI test.
It might have been covering the bug now.
Right, which is now covering the bug, which is associated with it. So it may not be as bad. And one of these, for example, is a doc that was updated. So I'm actually not seeing the code that was fixed, right? So cause for concern. I've got check-ins against a bug, but it doesn't look like the check-in actually fixed code. So I need to start asking questions now. And that's really the most important part of this is I need to know the questions to ask to be able to spot check things. So using this, I can spot check huge swaths of an application in no time at all. And you can't do that without drilling through everything.
Right. Well, that's been fascinating. Can you tell me what's the take-up of this tool been like? Like, it's pretty generous that you build this tool for free and put it up there. Are people using it?
So there's been 3,000 downloads, around 3,000 downloads. Not that many, only like 100 for the 2013 version, which, granted, it's just out. But I think 3,000 is pretty good. I'd like to see more people use it, but you have to have Visual Studio Ultimate for it, which is obviously the more expensive SKU because that's the only thing the Architecture Explorer works in. But I don't, I think one of the things about being an MVP, right, is, sharing what you do, right? I built a tool. I thought it was really cool. I thought people could get some benefit out of it. So I put it out there.
So, well, it's definitely beneficial. What is the future? What things are you planning on adding? Are you going to give out-of-the-box reports or anything like that?
So I am contemplating doing a web-based version of this. Taking it out of Visual Studio and just opening it up to
Tasty.
everybody.
That sounds good. Oh.
Yeah. It's a little bit harder. I'm having to learn a little bit more JavaScript than
a lot more.
yes, than I knew before. And there's some libraries out there to help. But my goal is
TypeScript all the way.
I'm learning TypeScript also. Yes, it's a big learning curve, but my goal would be to make this available to more people.
Great. So we might need Ultimate one day.
Right. You wouldn't need Ultimate one day, and I am definitely working on this possibly as a form for a work item where it would just show for that work item all the traceability while you're on it. I don't know if I could do anything this expansive on the web because I'm not Tiago. So.
Well, with that was fantastic. Thank you, Jeff. And with that, this is Adam Kogan signing off for SSW TV. Did you get all that? We'll take the SSW TV quiz and test your knowledge now.